Hey viewer, you don't know me, I don't know you, but you clicked on this video because you obviously want to stay informed on topics such as this. So if you could consider liking and subscribing, well, I would really appreciate it as it helps me spread out the information as I'm currently talking about to all people who currently click on this video or get this on your For You page. Thank you for considering it and have a blessed day. What does a salamander, political power, and American elections all have in common? Gerrymandering. And as you clicked on the thumbnail of this video and title, that's what the topic of this video is about. It's when one side claims to support a fair election, the second they gain control of a state legislature, many politicians start drawing maps designed to keep themselves in power within the state. Today we're breaking down why gerrymandering actually is, why both parties defend it when it helps them, why attempts to ban have failed. Because in America, politicians don't always let voters choose them. Sometimes politicians choose who their voters really are. Gerrymandering is when a political district are drawn in a way where one political party gets an unfair advantage over the other. And just like that, the word gerrymandering was born. Today, it's become a science and a method on how people can win elections regardless of what voters really think. It dilutes people's opinions, and because of this, many districts have redrawn their districts ever since the Equal Rights Act of 1964 was basically gutted by the Supreme Court ruling. In modern political strategies, people often use voting history, racial demographics, census data, income levels, and even consumer behavior to design districts that maximize political power for the political power that is currently in charge. There are two current main strategies behind this, which is number one, packing. What's packing? Packing is putting as many opposition voters as possible into one tiny little district. Cracking is another tool that they use, basically by splitting opposition voters in multiple districts so they can't get a majority vote anywhere, and both parties accuse each other of exactly doing this. Republicans and Democrats both do this, by the way. This is where the conversation starts getting a little uncomfortable. Republicans often use to dominate gerrymandering discussions because they control many states' legislature after the 2010 census. States like Texas, North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin, becoming a national flashpoint on heavily Republican-favored districts. Critics argue that maps allow Republicans to win more seats than Democrats receive millions of votes statewide. But Democrats are not innocent in this topic either. In states where Democrats control the process, like Illinois, Maryland, and historically New York, they've also drawn aggressive maps to benefit their own party. Look at Chicago over here, for example. Kind of looks like a computer chip, just saying. Maryland has also become infamous in one congressional district so oddly that it almost looks impossible to defend. And Illinois, Democrats openly admit that they were trying to maximize Democrat congressional seats. So while politicians love accusing the other side to rigging democracy, both parties often support gerrymandering when they're the ones being in the benefit. The real difference is usually what comes down to who currently has power. Why do politicians love gerrymandering? Why do they love it so much to the degree why they almost practically use it every 10 years in America? Well, politicians fight extremely hard over districts maps because district lines can decide elections before a single vote is cast. In heavily gerrymandered states, competitive elections basically disappear, incumbents become nearly impossible to remove, extremists gain influence, and voters often feel like their vote doesn't really matter, which is why voter turnout ends up being low. This creates safe districts, where politicians fear primary challengers more than the general election itself. That can push both parties to further towards ideological extremes, which is not what we want at all. That's why critics, often both from the left and the right, say that gerrymandering damages public confidence in the government, which it really does. Because at this point, the only way voters really have a way of saying their opinion, and when they're extremely frustrated, as if right now, is by voting, to let the government know that we are not happy of what's currently going on in our nation. You take away that, what do we have? Well, America was known as a nation of democracy. We're not a nation of democracy. If our vote doesn't extremely matter to the case where you gerrymander a state, it won't even matter who you vote for because the election was rigged from the start. Now here's the crazy part. Multiple states have attempted to ban gerrymandering. There have been many lawsuits, ballot initiatives, federal reform bills, independent commissions, and constitutional challenges. Some states create independent redistricting, often to remove politicians from the process entirely. States in like Arizona, California, and Michigan. 2 of those states are Democrats. 1 of those states, I think, are Republicans. Although, you can check me on that. Editor, put an editor's note, just so I know. I'll come back and check to that. But nationwide reform is practically impossible. Congressional repeatedly failed to pass major reform bills on gerrymandering legislation. And then came one of the biggest Supreme Court decisions in modern election law. In 2019, the Supreme Court ruled in Rucho versus Common Cause, the federal court could not decide cases about partisan gerrymandering. The court basically said, yeah, partisan gerrymandering may be unfair, but federal judges are not the ones to be deciding when partisan map drawing went too far. Critics were often furious about this ruling, and they argued that ruling essentially gave politicians a green light to continue manipulating district maps. Supporters of that ruling said unelected judges should not decide political questions, but the decision shifted the battle to state governments. And that's where reactions across America became widely different. How states reacted after federal voting protections were weakened. The federal government's role in election oversight has already changed years earlier. In 2013, the Supreme Court decision, Shelby County versus Holder, weakened key parts of the Voting Rights Act. Specifically, the court struck down a formula that determined which state and the federal level needed federal approval before changing voter laws. Before that ruling, certain states with historical racial discrimination had to get pre-clearance from the federal government before changing election rules or district maps. After the ruling, states gained way more control, and reactions varied dramatically, going and varying from state to state. In Republican-led states, many Republican-controlled states argued that ruling restored state sovereignty. Some states quickly implemented things like voter ID laws, new district maps, and election rule changes and voting procedure reforms. Supporters said that these measures protected the election's integrity. Critics argued that disproportionately affected minority voters. In Democrat-led states, many Democratic-controlled states went in the opposite direction. Some expanded on early voting, mail-in voting, automatic voter registration, and independent redistricting efforts. Democratic officials warned the Supreme Court ruling weakened the federal civil rights protections. Several blue states also filed lawsuits challenging maps drawn in Republican-led states. Now, the quick question you have to ask yourself, does gerrymandering only help one party? Here's the thing about political commentators that they won't admit. Gerrymandering doesn't permanently help one party. It helps whichever party is drawing the maps. Right now, Republicans often benefit more nationally because they control more state legislators. But whenever Democrats gain full control of certain states, they often use the same method. This is why critics say the system itself is rather broken, because in every part they use the tactic once they gain power. The initiative to fix the system practically disappears, and whoever's in charge. Some possible solutions that I've concocted up, or not just concocted up myself, but have read online, is some proposals could include by taking away districts from other politicians and making independent commissions, using an algorithm map by using computer-generated districts, often focusing on geography instead of politics, or making a national standard by creating federal rules on how districts can be drawn. But every proposed solution has immediately become political, because whichever party is in control think that reform can hurt their party and chances at next election, so they typically usually oppose it and whoever's in charge. Gerrymandering hurts everybody, every single American there is out there, regardless of political ideology, because America is supposed to be free. We are the ones who are supposed to be voting our state legislators, our senators, our presidents, and actually, I'm going to talk about this at the White House. When districts are energied in back rooms and public loses the trust in the entire system, people start feeling like their voice does not matter. Not because they stop caring, but because the system is designed to make outcomes predictable before a single ballot is even casted within the community. This is not democracy as intended. This democracy is being managed for political advantage. The only way the community has to speak in this entire nation is through voting. And it does not make sense, nor is it fair, for people to dilute our votes from state to state when they gerrymander our states and our districts just so one political power can stay in power within. It is not fair for the current political parties when they use gerrymandering. Right now, we currently have a Republican president back there by the name of Donald John Trump supporting gerrymandering. Now, don't get me wrong, all parties, Democrat and Republican, have both used gerrymandering to their advantage. We should not be doing this. Gerrymandering should be outlawed completely. And because of this, now because the Republicans have both control over the House, the Senate, and the presidency, they're basically trying to outlaw the Democrats by making liberal thoughts illegal. How can you get away with this? How can you get away with a thought process like this? The only way the people have the right to voice their opinions are through voting. When you take away voting, what do we have? This is supposed to be a democracy. If this is supposed to be a democracy, then we should have the right to vote. We should have the right to vote for who we want as our representatives. We should have the right to vote for who we want as our senators and who we want as our president. So when we have our president over there encouraging gerrymandering to the highest degree, well, then what do we have? Not a nation of democracy, but a nation full of lies.
At the end of the day, gerrymandering reveals something uncomfortable about the American political landscape. Both parties want fair elections, both parties accuse the other side of undermining democracy, but where's power in the line? Many politicians suddenly become very uncomfortable with maps that help them stay in office, and that leaves the voter a very big question. If elections are supposed to be represented by the people, should politicians really be allowed to design the battlefield? If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and comment your opinion below. And really, I want to hear your suggestions on what my next video should be about. Thank you, and have a blessed day.